normal. It's so normal to have these feelings of grief and loss, but we're not taught how to grieve. No one set us down and taught us how to respond. So we normally look back and think about examples we had in life, people who've had losses in their life. How did they respond? Most of the time, they were stuffing it, holding it in. That is not necessarily the best way to deal with grief. What I found was a very powerful message that helped me personally, because I had the death of my dad. Suddenly, it robbed me of the opportunity to say goodbye. It robbed me of the opportunity to finish up my business with my dad. And so I had some unfinished business. And so I struggled with that for about 3 years, kept it stuffed. But then I went to a friend for some help. He guided me to some people that could give me some information. And I remember this statement coming from that help. What you feel on the inside when you have a loss in your life, the emptiness, the loneliness, the sadness, that's your grief. No one can see that. It's personal, it's private, it's different for every person, even in the same family. Everyone responds differently. But that's on the inside. But when you talk about it, it becomes mourning. So grief is on the inside, mourning is when it's expressed. When I read my Bible, I find out Jesus did not say, blessed are those who grieve. Jesus said, blessed those who mourn. They shall be comforted. So that's the difference between holding it in and letting it out. That's the difference. I think we find comfort when we let it out. What I'll share with you today in our session are actually some tools that kind of help let it out. In fact, I'm also going to share some information about grief in the holidays. As we're doing this recording, we're very near to Thanksgiving, and Christmas is just around the corner. But you know what? Any holiday can be difficult. It may be Mother's Day or Father's Day that can be difficult. Maybe Memorial Day, because you always had a family get together on Memorial Day. Those can be difficult times. But the tools I share with you, I think, can be valuable to use throughout the year. But I'll be sharing some of that in a little bit. But I wanted to start with what's normal. What's normal following loss? Every time I use that word, I'm reminded of a lady in one of my grief groups. I mentioned the word normal, and she says, Bob, the only thing normal in my life is a setting on the washing machine dial that says normal. I went home and looked at the setting on the washing machine, all those words on the dial as they related to grief. Normal is on that dial. So is heavy load. Because some days the load's going to be so heavy you can't get out of bed. Light load is on that dial. In fact, on those days where you just run in circles and do not accomplish anything, that's your spin cycle. That's what you've been doing all day. If you cry a lot, that's your rinse cycle. On the bottom right-hand side of our dial is 2 words, cool down and pause. Because sometimes we need to do that also in our grief journey. I hope that's what you're doing today. Taking time out, cool down a little bit, just pause, because maybe there's some things that can be shared today that would be helpful. What I present are tools. I'll present some tools for you today, but I can tell you right up front, they're worthless until you apply them. Then they have value. So I can share a lot of things, and I encourage you to make an effort to apply them into your life. What is normal following a loss? Being numb. I think that's God's shock absorber, actually. I think we go into shock. We can't feel things. Then after a while, we start feeling those memories, and it hurts. The feeling comes back. So we go back into numbness. So we go back and forth into that area of numbness. Very normal to have that. I think it's because when we lose someone in death, we lose them physically. We lose a physical relationship. We never lose people emotionally. We never lose people spiritually. We lose a physical relationship. It ends. And we struggle with it because we have so many memories that flood back. And sometimes those memories are painful, and sometimes they'll cause us to laugh, sometimes they'll cause us to cry. Because emotionally, that person is still with us. So please realize that you can't just forget about someone. The memories are there. So it's very normal to be numb and have those memories come back in waves. Okay, it might be very painful. It's also normal for your eating and sleeping patterns to change. If you were a caregiver for someone on hospice, your eating patterns and sleeping patterns had already changed. You were on their schedule. So after a death occurs, we have to struggle and find out what the new normal is for us. And there is a new normal. It's okay if you don't like it because you didn't choose it. It's just going to be a new normal for you. It may not be the way it always had been because we are not the way we always have been. Things change. In fact, we grieve change. We grieve change. As a hospice caregiver, you're watching changes take place right in front of you, day by day. Suddenly, the person you were caring for does not look like the photo on the wall. There's a lot of changes take place. In fact, there's a word I prefer to use instead of the word caregiver. I find that we talk with a lot of people who are caregivers, grieving while we give care. And sometimes we just have to hold it in, put up a mask, and do our work and take care of someone. And that can be a very difficult thing, very painful to do. But realizing that we're grievers, that's the big step right there. The eating patterns can change. What's going to happen? You're going to discover a comfort food. That's a food that you can eat without even thinking about it. It may be something that's sweet or salty. It may be something from your past that's what you've always drawn to. I had one gentleman tell me his comfort food was anything you can microwave. In other words, he wanted it in a hurry. But you may find yourself on the couch and you look next to you and there's an empty bag of potato chips. You wonder who ate those. You realize you just ate those. You ate the entire bag, but not even thinking. I believe that starts when we're a child and we're crying about something. Some adult is going to say, oh, honey, don't cry. Here's a cookie. So we still say food with feeling bad. And we get into this. So it's really important to watch the nutrition portion as a griever and realize that there are some comfort foods. It's not all bad, but just like everything else in life, moderation. That's the key. Do it in moderation because we do need to eat and our appetite's going to change. It is more difficult to shop for one than it was when you shop for two. And it's more difficult to cook for one than it was for two. So we make all these changes. Your sleeping patterns will change. Very normal for that. Again, if you were a caregiver, your sleeping pattern had already changed. You slept like a new mom with one ear open, just listening for a change in the breathing or a noise, and you were up and going. So it's hard to get that good night's sleep. But, physicians can give us something to help us sleep better. They can give us something to help our appetite, but relief from grief doesn't come in pill form. They cannot give us anything to take away the grief. There's some well-meaning people that will say things like, it's been 6 months and you should be over it by now. Or it's been a year and you should be over it by now. Grief does not go by a calendar. It doesn't go by a calendar at all. But I have developed a way to tell when you're over grief. 100% accurate. This is a way to tell when you're over grief. In fact, you can take this test very easy. Is you take your hand and put it across your chest. If you feel a beat, you're not over it. As long as you got a brain and a heartbeat, we're going to be grievers. Now, the key is that we're going to be a griever the rest of our life. It is like a marathon. It isn't a sprint to get to the end of it. But the key is that it doesn't overwhelm us. What I'll share with you today are some things that might help soften it some. Grief will always be there, but we can soften it. So maybe we can take a deep breath occasionally. It's very normal to lose our concentration. In fact, I often suggest to people they become list makers. Make some lists. Keep making lists of things you need to accomplish today. When you do one, scratch it off the list. And once you didn't finish that day, move it to tomorrow's list. But make a list. In fact, I recommend that you put that all in one notebook instead of several places. That way you can keep track of the list easier. But it helps to make a list and check it off. Because what happens, as I said earlier, we lose people physically, but we never lose them emotionally. So to be as close as you want to be to someone who dies, you do not have to go to a cemetery. You can go to memories. Do you realize you can drive a car without a brain in the car? We do it. We drive a car without even thinking about the road ahead of us. So do not be alarmed if you've had an auto accident since the death, if you've locked your keys in the car, if you locked yourself out of the house, because it's that concentration level. And unfortunately, it happens at a time when we're called upon to come up with all kinds of dates and all kinds of numbers and names and give information for obituaries and insurance papers. and we can't even think. Our mind is shot. It does come back. That's one of the helpful things about making a list. We have to focus on that. That's one of the things that will be helpful, focusing. Your moods will change. In fact, someone might point that out to you, that your moods change. You're awful snappy now, or you get irritated real quick. It's because we've had a loss. That can cause us to have a change in our moods. And so it's very normal to do that. And I want to share with you the most normal response that I find. Tears. Tears at unexpected times. You know, you expect to cry at a funeral, or you expect to cry at certain anniversary dates and birthdays, but you don't expect to cry in a grocery store, but you will, because you passed the food you always bought for them, their favorite food, and it can cause the tears because it can remind you of that relationship. So I encourage you to let yourself be normal. That's one of the most difficult things we do, is to allow ourselves to be normal. Sometimes we want to hurry up and get through the grief. There is not a fast pace to get us through the grief any quicker. So again, it's different for every person in the family. Each person is a little bit different. So I would say to have patience with ourselves, have patience with other family members. I think it's important for us to find someone who will hear us when we want to talk. A few years ago, I was leading a grief support group. There was a young man in the group. He was 17 years old. He had a friend who died. I made the statement, as a griever, we need